Today we are going to discuss about deterministic finite automata. The objectives: formal definition of DFA, DFA processing strings, notations for DFA, the language accepted by DFA. Definition: in DFA, on each input there is exactly one transition from state to state. Formally, the DFA can be represented by 5 tuples. A is equal to capital Q, sigma, delta, Q naught and F, where capital Q is finite set of states, sigma is finite input alphabet, Q naught is the initial state, that is Q naught belongs to Q, F is the set of final or accepting states, F is the subset of Q. Delta is a transition function. Delta maps Q cross sigma to Q. That is, this function takes a state and an input symbol and returns a state. If Q is a state and A is an input symbol, then delta of Q comma A is equal to P. DFA processing strings. The language of DFA is the set of all strings accepted by DFA. Assume that A1, A2 and so on An is a sequence of input symbols. Then delta of Q0 comma A1 is equal to Q1. Delta of Q1 comma A2 is equal to Q2 and so on. Delta Qn minus 1 comma An is equal to Qn. If Qn is the member of F, then input A1, A2 and so on An is accepted. If not, then rejected. Notations for DFA. The two preferred notations for DFA are transition diagram and a transition table. The transition diagram is a graph defined as follows. For each state in Q, there is a node. For each state Q in capital Q and each input symbol A in sigma, delta of Q comma A is equal to P. Then the transition diagram has an arc from node Q to node P labeled A as shown below. If there are several input symbols that cause transitions from Q to P, then the transition diagram have one arc labeled by list of these input symbols. There is an arrow into the state Q0 labeled start. This arrow does not originate to any node. Node corresponds to final or accepting states are marked by double circle. States not in F have single circle. Transition table. A transition table is a conventional table representation of a transition function delta that makes two arguments and returns a value. The rows of a table correspond to the states and columns correspond to the inputs. The entry for each row corresponds to the state Q and the column corresponds to the input A is state delta of Q comma A. Example: draw a transition diagram and a transition table for the DFA accepting all strings with a substring 0, 1. This is the transition. It starts Q1, Q0. For any number of ones, it is in the same state. When in Q0, if the input is 0, it goes to Q2. If in Q2, in any number of zeros, it stays in Q2. After reading a 1, it goes to Q1. Q1 is the final state. When reaching a final state, it accepting any number of zeros and ones. This is the transition table, where Q0 on 0, it goes to Q2. Q0 on 0, it goes to Q2. Q0 on 1, Q0 on 1, it is in Q0. Q1 on 0, Q1 on 0 is in Q1. Q1 on 1 is Q1. Q2 on 0 is Q2, Q2 on 1 is Q1. Thank you.